K.L. Arden walked quietly through the crowded corridors of the orbital trade hub, his hands clasped behind his back. The hub was alive with activity. Merchants haggled over rare ores, engineers hurried to repair ships, and diplomats from dozens of species exchanged hurried words in languages K.L. did not recognize. To the untrained eye, it was chaos. But K.L. had long learned to see the patterns beneath it all. Every gesture, every pause, every glance held meaning. And K.L. had long learned how to wait. As he moved, his mind drifted to the memory that had never left him. 27 years ago, he had been a young human emissary, barely out of his teens, standing in the Grand Council Hall of the Galactic Alliance. The hall had been massive, filled with towering columns and suspended crystal panels that projected the emblems of every member race. But all K.L. could remember was her, the alien princess Lizera. She had been radiant, with scales that shimmered like molten metal, and eyes that seemed to pierce through every soul in the room. She had smiled at him then, a smile full of arrogance, and addressed him with words that had stung deeper than any physical blow. Humans were primitive, she had said. Emotional. Short-lived. Inadequate to hold their own among the stars. K.L. had felt the heat rise to his cheeks, a mixture of anger and embarrassment, but he had said nothing, not a word. Instead, he had bowed politely and left the council hall, letting the sound of his footsteps echo down the marbled corridors. That silent departure had spoken louder than any retort he could have offered. At the time, many had thought the young human had been cowed, intimidated by the alien aristocracy. But K.L. had known then what he knew now. Silence could be more powerful than any argument. Anger could cloud judgment. Rash words could bind one to the moment. And humans, K.L. had always believed, had the strength to endure, to wait, and to rise in ways that others could not anticipate. The trade hub around him had changed little in appearance since those early days of human diplomacy. But the balance of power had shifted dramatically. Humans had grown in ways the aliens had never imagined. K.L. thought of the colonies spread across dozens of star systems, of the innovations that had once seemed impossible. Self-repairing ships, AI-driven navigation, sustainable orbital farms, and through it all, K.L. had watched quietly, guiding humanity's rise without ever boasting, without ever calling attention to himself. A group of young alien merchants passed by, chattering in a language K.L. understood only partially. He smiled faintly at them, noting their gestures and expressions. The galaxy was a complex place, and every species had its own way of marking status, of signaling intentions. Humans had learned to read these signals, to adapt, to survive, but they had also learned to remain true to themselves, to act with patience and integrity, even when others underestimated them. K.L. stopped near a viewing window and looked out at the field of ships anchored in the hub's orbit. Some were sleek and elegant, adorned with the emblems of powerful alien houses. Others were rugged, utilitarian, built for speed and endurance rather than show. Among them floated a small human vessel, modest in design, yet gleaming with efficiency and purpose. It was a quiet reminder of human ingenuity, of the work done in secret, of the careful planning and foresight that had brought humanity to this point. He remembered another detail from that fateful day 27 years ago. Lysera had leaned forward during the council meeting, her tone dripping with mockery. "Your species is fascinating," she had said, like children trying to mimic the stars. "Tell me, young human, how long do you imagine you will survive in this hall of giants?" K.L. had smiled politely, holding back the retort that had formed on his lips. Instead, he had simply nodded and stepped back, leaving the hall with a composed demeanor. That departure had puzzled the alien delegates, who had expected a show of weakness or outrage. But K.L.'s silence had been deliberate. It had been the first act in a story that humans would write in their own time. In the years that followed, humans had quietly built alliances with races that the Galactic Alliance had dismissed as inconsequential. K.L. had fostered relationships with merchants, explorers, and engineers across the galaxy, creating a network of influence that was subtle, yet formidable. Humans had solved crises that others had thought insurmountable, defusing political tensions on war-torn planets, mediating disputes over valuable resources, and pioneering technologies that had once existed only in dreams. Lysera, for her part, had not changed much. She remained proud, confident in her status, certain of humanity's inferiority. But Kale knew that pride often blinded those who wielded it. She did not see the quiet determination, the careful planning, and the steady growth of a species that refused to be dismissed. She did not see the countless humans who had worked tirelessly to prove that their value was not in flamboyant displays of power but in resilience, creativity, and moral strength. Kale's thoughts were interrupted by a soft chime from his wrist communicator. A message had arrived from the human delegation coordinating logistics for the summit meeting that was scheduled to begin soon. He read the brief note, noting the progress of the negotiations and the arrival of key representatives from allied species. Everything was proceeding as planned. He looked once more at the field of ships, imagining the years that had passed since that first encounter with Lysera. So much had changed. Yet the memory of that young princess's arrogance remained vivid. It was a reminder of what humans had endured, of the patience required to build influence quietly, and of the satisfaction that came from letting one's accomplishments speak louder than any insult. A young human assistant approached, bowing slightly. "Sir Arden, the council is ready for your arrival." "The other delegates have begun gathering." Kale nodded, placing a hand briefly on the assistant's shoulder. "Thank you. Lead the way." As he walked toward the meeting chamber, Kale reflected on the strategy that had brought humanity this far. They had learned not to react to mockery, not to be provoked by arrogance, not to rush into confrontations they were not prepared for. Instead, they had observed, adapted, and grown stronger, all while maintaining the values that defined them. In this galaxy, strength was measured not only in fleets and weapons, but in patience, integrity, and the ability to influence without force. The chamber awaited, a circular room with high ceilings and walls lined with symbols representing every member race. Kale entered calmly, nodding to the alien delegates, some of whom glanced at him curiously. He did not rush, did not flaunt his presence. Instead, he allowed his reputation and humanity's accomplishments to precede him. Even if Lysera were present, and Kale did not yet know he was confident, the human spirit had endured mockery and doubt, had risen in silence, and had proven itself capable of standing alongside the greatest civilizations in the galaxy. His departure 27 years ago had been the first chapter of that story, a story still unfolding with each choice humans made, each alliance they forged, and each problem they solved with ingenuity and compassion. Kale moved to his designated position at the head of the human delegation and stood, surveying the room with calm authority. There was no need for grand gestures or proclamations. The humans had learned long ago that true strength often lay in quiet confidence, in the ability to act decisively without arrogance, and in letting actions, rather than words, define one's legacy. As the summit began, Kale's mind remained anchored to that memory of Lysera's laughter, her sharp words, and the shock that had flickered across her face when he had walked away. That single moment, frozen in time, had shaped him, shaped humanity, and reminded all who doubted them that underestimation could be humanity's greatest advantage. The meeting moved forward, discussions flowing between delegates, alliances forming, and strategies unfolding. Kale listened carefully, interjecting only when necessary, guiding conversations with subtlety and insight. Every suggestion he made was grounded in logic, diplomacy, and the unspoken knowledge that humans had the patience to wait for the right moment to assert themselves fully. He glanced briefly at the projection panels displaying images of human colonies, technologies, and humanitarian initiatives. Each image was a testament to what humans could achieve when underestimated, each a silent message to those who had once mocked them. And though Lysera's face was not yet visible among the delegates, Kale knew that when she finally saw the results of centuries of human resilience and ingenuity, she would understand. Words had failed to define humans. Mockery had failed to diminish them. What remained was the enduring evidence of their strength, their intelligence, and their unwavering commitment to rise above doubt. Kale took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years and the quiet satisfaction of seeing humanity flourish. The galaxy might have been skeptical once, but it would learn that humans were not a species to be underestimated, mocked, or dismissed. The silent departure that had puzzled Lyzera 27 years ago was now a foundation upon which the entire human legacy had been built. The summit continued, but Kale's mind remained partly in the past, partly in the future. He had learned long ago that true victory often came quietly, without fanfare, and that patience could outlast arrogance. And as the sun of the nearby star cast its warm light across the hub, Kale felt a sense of calm assurance. Humanity was ready, not for confrontation, but for recognition. They had grown stronger, wiser, and more resilient than any alien could have imagined. And in that quiet, steadfast strength lay the answer to the laughter, the mockery, and the doubt that had once been directed at them. Humans had endured, humans had risen, and humans had spoken volumes without uttering a single word. The galaxy was not kind to the weak. Kale Arden had learned this lesson early in his life, and he had seen humanity learn it as well. After that first meeting with Princess Lycera 27 years ago, humans had faced skepticism, ridicule, and outright dismissal from almost every corner of the Galactic Alliance. Yet they endured. They grew. And they did it quietly, steadily, without drawing unnecessary attention. The story of humanity's rise was not marked by dramatic battles or flashy displays of power. It was measured in persistence, innovation, and intelligence. Kale thought of the first human colonies beyond their solar system. Planets that had once been barren and inhospitable now thrived with self-sustaining cities, energy-efficient farms, and orbital hubs capable of supporting millions of humans and alien visitors alike. Every colony was carefully planned, every project built to last, reflecting a species that valued both foresight and resilience. Kale had overseen many of these initiatives. He had traveled to worlds on the edge of known space, negotiating treaties with alien leaders who had once looked down upon humans. Some of these leaders had been wary of humans, seeing them as naive or impulsive. Yet Kale's patience and calm demeanor had won them over. He did not rely on intimidation or force. He relied on reason, empathy, and the quiet demonstration of human capability. One such example came from the planet of Sarathus. A decade earlier, a critical trade route between two alien worlds had been disrupted by a natural disaster. The resulting tension had threatened to escalate into open conflict. Kale had been sent to mediate. Upon arrival, he observed the situation carefully, noting the cultural customs and the unspoken dynamics between the factions. Over the next several months, Kale orchestrated a solution that involved shared resources, joint construction of infrastructure, and technological aid from humans. By the time the crisis was resolved, both alien worlds recognized humans as capable and trustworthy allies. Kale smiled faintly at the memory. That was humanity's way. They did not seek glory for themselves. They acted with purpose, guided by logic and compassion. This approach had become a hallmark of human presence in the galaxy, earning them respect in circles that had once dismissed them entirely. Not all of humanity's progress was visible in politics or diplomacy. Technology had advanced in ways that even the most arrogant alien races could not anticipate. Humans had developed starships capable of navigating uncharted regions of space with unmatched efficiency. AI-assisted navigation systems allowed crews to focus on strategy rather than routine tasks. Energy systems, once thought limited, now harnessed stellar radiation, allowing long-term interstellar travel without dependence on fragile supply chains. Kale had been involved in many of these projects, though often behind the scenes, ensuring that human innovation served long-term goals rather than immediate recognition. Education and culture had grown alongside technology. Humans valued knowledge and creativity. Young humans were trained not only in science and engineering, but in diplomacy, ethics, and strategic thinking. Kale often visited academies on distant worlds to speak with students, sharing stories not of conquest, but of patience, perseverance, and integrity. It was part of the human strength. They understood that leadership was not about domination, but about guiding others while remaining true to one's values. Despite these successes, Kale never underestimated the challenge of maintaining respect in a galaxy where arrogance and prejudice were common. Many alien factions still clung to old beliefs about human inferiority. Some openly dismissed human capabilities, while others subtly tried to manipulate humans to serve their own interests. Kale knew that patience alone would not suffice. Humans had to demonstrate tangible results. And they had. One of the most significant examples occurred during the expansion into the Thalorian Expanse, a sector of space previously considered dangerous and uninhabitable. Humans had sent exploratory missions, led by Kale's trusted teams, to survey the area. They discovered resources, navigable wormholes, and planets suitable for colonization. The alien races who had dismissed humanity as weak were forced to reconsider when humans began establishing thriving outposts that balanced technological advancement with environmental respect. Humans did not conquer, they collaborated, demonstrating that strength included the ability to respect and enhance other societies rather than dominate them. Kale reflected on these achievements with quiet pride. Humanity's rise had been deliberate, and deliberate alone. They had learned to work under the radar, letting others underestimate them while quietly preparing for the future. Their strategy was simple yet effective: patience, observation, and incremental growth. Every project, every alliance, every technological advance was a step in building a foundation that no arrogance could topple. In recent years, humanity's reputation had begun to shift significantly. Once overlooked or mocked, humans were now recognized as essential players in the Galactic Alliance. They were respected mediators, inventive engineers, and strategic planners. Kale's role had been subtle, often behind the scenes, but the influence of his guidance was evident in every success. Lysera, of course, had not changed her view of humans. Kale had followed her career with interest over the years. She remained proud, confident, and occasionally dismissive, certain that humans had achieved their success only through luck or circumstance. Yet Kale knew the truth. Human progress was the product of careful thought, relentless effort, and a refusal to be diminished by arrogance. Kale's thoughts returned to the present moment. He stood in the human command center orbiting the trade hub, observing operations as messages from the colonies and fleets streamed in. Each report confirmed humanity's steady influence and increasing prominence. Yet, there was no boastfulness, no unnecessary display of power. Humans acted not for recognition but because they understood that true strength was built on substance, not appearances. A young technician approached Kale, holding a tablet with updated reports from the outer colonies. Sir Arden, the latest survey data from the Zetar system shows the new settlement is thriving. The energy converters are fully operational, and the population growth is ahead of projections. Kale nodded, taking the tablet. Good work. Ensure that the communication relays are maintained. Let them know we are ready to assist if any issues arise. The technician bowed and left, and Kale studied the data. Zetar had once been considered too unstable for human settlement. Now, thanks to careful planning and cooperation with local alien species, it was a model of efficiency and sustainability. It was proof that humans could succeed where others failed. Not through aggression or force, but through foresight, collaboration, and determination. Kale's mind wandered to the young humans he had trained over the years, now leading missions across the galaxy. They embodied the best qualities of humanity: intelligence, adaptability, empathy, and resilience. Kale had always believed that humans' greatest strength lay not in technology or weaponry, but in their ability to endure, to think critically, and to act with integrity even when underestimated. He remembered the faces of the alien leaders who had once laughed at humans, who had mocked their supposed weakness and impatience. Many of those faces had changed over the years, as humans quietly demonstrated their capabilities. Some had become allies. Some grudgingly respected humans' ingenuity, and others had simply been left behind, unable to comprehend the deliberate and steady approach that had brought humanity to prominence. Kale smiled faintly. Humanity's rise had not been swift or flashy, but it had been unstoppable. They had learned to balance ambition with ethics, innovation with responsibility, and patience with action. Every challenge they faced had strengthened them. Every doubt cast by others had fueled their determination, and every success had built a legacy that no mockery could diminish. In the quiet of the command center, Kale considered the larger picture. Humanity was no longer the species that Lysera had mocked 27 years ago. They had grown stronger, wiser, and more capable than anyone could have predicted. And yet, Kale knew that the true test of humanity's progress was not in recognition or accolades, but in the continued ability to act with integrity, even in the face of arrogance or doubt. The day was drawing to a close, and the hub was bathed in the warm light of the distant star around which it orbited. Kale stood by the observation window, watching ships depart and arrive, each carrying humans, aliens, and cargo essential to the growing network of interstellar cooperation. He felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that every effort, every decision, and every act of patience had contributed to the humans' enduring success. Humanity had been underestimated, mocked, and dismissed. Yet, through careful strategy, innovation, and moral strength, they had risen. Kale understood that the story of humans' rise was not yet complete, but the foundations were solid. The galaxy was beginning to recognize them not for their arrogance, not for their power, but for their ability to endure, adapt, and thrive. Kale turned from the window, moving back to his console to review the final reports for the day. The human fleets were ready, the colonies were stable, and the alliances they had built were strong. He felt the quiet confidence that came from knowing that humans were no longer defined by others' mockery, but by their own achievements. And somewhere, in a distant part of the galaxy, Princess Lysera would see the evidence of that growth. Perhaps she would finally understand that human silence had never been weakness. It had been a strategy, it had been patience, it had been the first step in a journey that no arrogance could stop. Kale leaned back in his chair, letting the hum of the command center settle around him. He knew that humanity's story was far from over. But he also knew that every step taken so far had proven one thing. Humans could endure. Humans could innovate. And humans could rise above mockery to claim their rightful place among the stars. And in that quiet triumph, Kale found a sense of purpose that had guided him for decades. To ensure that humanity's rise was not only respected, but remembered. Not through boastful declarations, but through the undeniable evidence of achievement and resilience. The Galactic Summit had begun, and the Grand Hall buzzed with energy. Representatives from dozens of species gathered around massive circular tables, their colorful uniforms and intricate robes reflecting the diversity of the galaxy. Kale Arden entered calmly, his presence unassuming yet commanding in its quiet assurance. He did not hurry or boast. He knew that true influence came not from display, but from the weight of achievement and thoughtful action. He scanned the hall, noting the familiar faces of the alien delegates. Many of them still carried the arrogance and skepticism he had witnessed decades ago. But Kale understood that respect was earned, not demanded. Humans had not come to the summit to flaunt power or authority. They had come to act with intelligence, integrity, and diplomacy, the qualities that had always defined them, even when others had dismissed them as inferior. The summit's discussions began with procedural matters, each delegate presenting reports from their home systems. Kale listened attentively, taking note of alliances, trade agreements, and disputes. The galaxy had changed significantly since humans had first begun their journey into interstellar diplomacy, and Kale knew that careful observation was essential. Every word spoken, every gesture made, contained subtle signals of intention and influence. As the meeting progressed, a projection panel displayed the latest developments in a sector plagued by territorial disputes. Two alien worlds, once on the brink of war over resource rights, had turned to humanity for mediation. Kale smiled inwardly. Humans had solved crises like this countless times without confrontation, without force, simply by demonstrating logic, fairness, and the willingness to cooperate. Lysera entered the hall then, her presence as striking as it had been 27 years ago. She had aged gracefully, but her eyes still held the sharpness and pride that had once cut so deeply into Kale's young self. She moved confidently to her seat, clearly expecting the familiar hierarchy in which humans were considered minor players. Kale observed her discreetly. Lysera did not yet recognize him, and he chose not to draw attention to himself. There was no need. Humans' accomplishments spoke louder than any introduction could. Every successful colony, every technological breakthrough, every treaty brokered quietly over the years, was proof of their growing influence. The discussion shifted to the newly discovered planet of Valoria. It was rich in rare minerals and strategically located near several important trade routes. Both alien factions were eager to claim it, and tensions threatened to escalate. Kale stood, projecting a calm demeanor as he addressed the assembly. Valoria's resources are significant, but the value of cooperation exceeds that of conflict, he said. Humans propose a joint management plan that ensures fair distribution, sustainable development, and shared benefits for all parties. We are willing to provide technical expertise and oversight to guarantee success. There were murmurs across the hall. Some delegates raised eyebrows, skeptical of human involvement. Yet Kale continued, presenting data, projections, and solutions with clarity and precision. Every suggestion was practical, every compromise carefully considered. He did not speak to dominate. He spoke to solve problems. One of Lysera's aides whispered something to her, and she glanced toward Kale with mild curiosity. He caught her eye for a brief moment and offered a polite nod. She frowned slightly, sensing a familiarity she could not immediately place. Kale remained composed. There was no need to reveal the connection yet. The results would speak for themselves. The vote on Valoria's management plan came quickly, and Humans' proposal was approved with overwhelming support. Delegates who had once underestimated humans now recognized the value of their ideas and leadership. Kale allowed a faint smile. The work was quiet, deliberate, and effective just as it had always been. Throughout the summit, Kale moved with strategic patience. He addressed disputes only when necessary, mediated conversations with careful timing, and ensured that humans' contributions were constructive rather than confrontational. Other species began to notice the pattern. Humans did not seek glory, yet their influence was undeniable. A particularly tense moment arose when two alien factions argued over a newly discovered energy source. Voices rose, tempers flared, and the debate threatened to derail the summit. Kale stepped forward, calmly analyzing the situation and offering a compromise based on data, ethics, and long-term benefit. Within moments, the factions had agreed to a solution, surprised by the simplicity and fairness of the proposal. Lysera watched this unfold with growing interest. Her earlier dismissiveness wavered as she realized that humans were not the naive or weak species she had once mocked. Their strength lay not in aggression, but in intellect, patience, and moral fortitude. Kale's silence 27 years ago had been a lesson she had failed to recognize until now. During a break in proceedings, Kale walked quietly to an observation balcony overlooking the trade hub. Ships of every kind passed below, carrying diplomats, traders, and explorers. He reflected on how far humanity had come. Once mocked and underestimated, humans now played a central role in the stability and progress of the galaxy. He thought of the generations of humans who had worked tirelessly to reach this point: scientists developing advanced technologies, engineers building sustainable colonies, diplomats negotiating alliances, and everyday humans contributing to a growing legacy. It was a testament to patience, vision, and the refusal to be diminished by others' arrogance. Lysera approached the balcony, her curiosity now fully piqued. "You are Kale Arden, aren't you?" she said quietly, recognition finally dawning. Kale turned slowly, his expression calm and measured. "I am," he replied, his voice steady. "It has been many years, Princess Lysera." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "I did not expect to see you here, leading your species among the stars." Kale offered a faint smile. "Nor did I expect my species to be underestimated for so long. We have grown quietly, carefully, and deliberately. The galaxy has changed in ways that cannot be undone." Lysera studied him, a mixture of surprise and reluctant respect in her gaze. She had believed that humans' initial attempts at diplomacy were naive, that their achievements would fade in time. Yet here he stood, embodying the very proof of humanity's resilience and capability. "You have done well," she admitted, her voice low. "Perhaps I misjudged your kind." Kale inclined his head slightly, neither gloating nor boasting. Misjudgment is common when one relies on arrogance instead of observation. Humans have always acted with purpose, often quietly, often without immediate recognition. But patience and persistence yield results, even when underestimated. The summit continued, and Kale returned to his duties, negotiating agreements, mediating disputes, and offering solutions that emphasized cooperation over dominance. His every action reinforced the message that humans were not to be dismissed. Every colony, every technological innovation, every diplomatic success was a reminder of what the species could achieve. As the day drew to a close, Kale reflected on the subtle victories of the summit. He had not sought to humiliate anyone, nor to prove himself personally. Instead, he had demonstrated that humanity's rise was the product of strategy, intelligence, and integrity. Other species had begun to take notice, and even Lysera's attitude had begun to shift. The lesson she had once mocked, the quiet departure, the patient strategy, had finally revealed its full meaning. Humans did not need to shout their accomplishments. Their work, their persistence, and their vision spoke volumes. The galaxy was starting to understand that true strength was not measured by arrogance or the ability to belittle others, but by the ability to endure, adapt, and achieve lasting progress. Kale stood on the balcony once more, gazing at the ships moving below. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, tempered by the knowledge that this was only a step in a much larger journey. Humanity's influence was growing, their presence respected, and their voice valued. Yet the story was far from complete. The galaxy would continue to test them, challenge them, and underestimate them, but humans had learned the power of quiet resilience and deliberate action. Lysera joined him, silent for a moment, watching the horizon. Finally, she spoke. "I see now that humans are not as fragile as I believed. Perhaps we have much to learn from you." Bowling, Kale nodded. "Perhaps we do, and perhaps you have much to reconsider. But it is not about proving superiority. It is about acting with purpose, integrity, and intelligence. That is what defines strength." For the first time, Lysera did not respond with pride or mockery. Instead, she simply observed, a subtle acknowledgement of the lesson she had failed to recognize for so long. The summit concluded with multiple agreements ratified, disputes resolved, and plans for cooperation established. Delegates left with a new appreciation for humanity's role in galactic affairs. Kale returned to his quarters, reflecting on the day's events and the journey that had brought him here. 27 years ago, a young human had walked out of a council hall, leaving behind mockery and doubt. Today, that same human, Kale Arden, stood as a quiet symbol of humanity's resilience, strategy, and moral strength. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a species that could endure, adapt, and succeed without arrogance, without force, and without losing the values that defined them. And in that quiet triumph, Kale knew that humanity's story would continue. Each achievement building upon the last, each act of patience and intelligence reinforcing the truth that underestimation was humanity's greatest advantage. The summit had ended, and the delegates had returned to their respective worlds. The hall that had been alive with debate and negotiation now lay quiet, its walls echoing only with the memory of voices and decisions made. Kyle Arden remained aboard the human command vessel, standing on the observation deck that overlooked the vast expanse of the trade hub. He watched ships of every size and shape move in precise formation, carrying humans, aliens, and goods across the galaxy. The sight filled him with a deep sense of satisfaction. Yet he knew the journey was far from complete. 27 years earlier, he had been a young emissary, mocked and belittled by Princess Lysera in front of the entire Galactic Alliance. At the time, the arrogance and condescension had stung sharply, leaving an impression that had never faded. Kale had learned, however, that true strength often lay not in immediate retaliation or defense, but in patience and quiet determination. That single moment had shaped the path of humanity in ways the galaxy would only now begin to recognize. Kale's reflection shifted to the present. Humans had grown quietly but consistently, establishing colonies in distant star systems, creating alliances with alien species, and developing technologies that expanded the limits of interstellar travel. Their rise had been deliberate, steady, and resilient. Unlike some civilizations that relied on force or intimidation, humans had relied on intelligence, morality, and ingenuity. Every decision, every project, and every alliance had been carefully calculated, a testament to a species that had learned the power of foresight. The Valoria dispute, settled earlier at the summit, was only one example of how humans had reshaped the galaxy. Their involvement had not only prevented a potential war but had also fostered long-term cooperation between alien civilizations that had previously been at odds. Kale thought of the countless other situations humans had handled similarly. Trade negotiations that had once seemed impossible. Colonization projects that transformed barren worlds into thriving communities, and crises resolved through careful diplomacy rather than violence. Humanity had grown respected not through boasting, but through action, consistency, and moral integrity. Lysera's reaction at the summit had been telling. She had recognized, perhaps for the first time, the quiet power of humanity. Her earlier mockery, once so sharp and confident, now seemed almost irrelevant against the backdrop of decades of human achievement. Kale understood that respect was not given lightly among the alien aristocracy. It was earned through persistent demonstration of capability, resilience, and the willingness to act for the greater good. Humans had accomplished all this without sacrificing their values, and that was what made their rise remarkable. As Kale observed the ships below, he reflected on the generations of humans who had contributed to this success. Scientists, engineers, diplomats, and ordinary citizens alike had all played a role. Every colony had been built, not on conquest, but on collaboration. Every technological advancement had been shared responsibly, ensuring stability and sustainability. Humans had learned to adapt to alien customs without losing their identity, to negotiate without compromising their principles, and to rise without arrogance. A message came through Kale's communicator, showing reports from multiple human colonies on the edge of the galaxy. Each report was a success story. Planets that had once been inhospitable now hosted vibrant cities, thriving ecosystems, and productive economies. Alien species who had initially doubted humans now partnered with them willingly, appreciating the balance of innovation, ethics, and practical problem-solving that defined human interaction. Kale felt a quiet satisfaction, but he also knew that humility was essential. Pride could blind a species to future challenges. Humans had learned that every success was not a final victory, but a foundation for further growth. The galaxy was vast, and there were still mysteries to explore, disputes to mediate, and alliances to strengthen. Yet Kale felt confident. Humanity had learned to endure, to innovate, and to act decisively when needed, all while remaining true to their core values. Lysera approached the observation deck, moving with the same grace she had always carried, though her eyes now held a trace of respect. She had spent decades in positions of power. Yet she could not deny the evidence before her. Humans had grown from the species she had once mocked into one of the most capable and influential civilizations in the galaxy. "You've done well," she said quietly, a statement free of mockery or condescension. "I underestimated your kind." "Perhaps more than once," Kale nodded slightly. "Underestimation is often the consequence of arrogance. It blinds one to possibilities and growth. Humans have always understood that patience and action matter more than words." She looked at him, thoughtful. "I see now that your silence all those years ago was not weakness. It was strategy." Kale smiled faintly. "Every choice we made was deliberate. Humanity has learned to wait, to grow quietly, and to act when the time is right. Mockery fades, but accomplishment endures." Lysera remained silent for a moment, taking in the scale of the human presence. Ships moved efficiently, colonies thrived, and alliances flourished. Everywhere she looked, the evidence of human ingenuity and resilience was undeniable. It was not the loud demonstrations of power that impressed her, but the steady, consistent, and thoughtful rise of a species once considered insignificant. Kale turned back to the observation window, watching a human fleet depart for a distant colony. The ships glinted in the starlight, symbols of progress, cooperation, and vision. Humanity's influence was not built on domination, but on the ability to endure challenges, adapt to circumstances, and create solutions that benefited more than themselves. It was a legacy of intelligence, morality, and foresight. He reflected on the early days of interstellar exploration when humans were dismissed, mocked, and doubted. The galaxy had tested them repeatedly, yet they had endured and grown stronger. Every challenge had been an opportunity to demonstrate patience, strategy, and the capacity to rise above prejudice. Kale had witnessed it firsthand, and he had played a role in guiding humanity along this path, yet he knew that no single individual could claim victory. Humanity's success was collective, built by countless people across generations. Lysera finally spoke again, her tone quieter, more reflective. I once thought humans lacked the discipline to endure the complexities of galactic politics. I was wrong. Kale turned to her, his expression calm. Discipline is not the absence of emotion or pride. It is the ability to act with foresight, to balance ambition with ethics, and to remain true to one's values, despite opposition. Humans have learned this over centuries of observation, effort, and collaboration. She studied him, her earlier arrogance replaced by a reluctant admiration. And the lesson I failed to see 27 years ago is that silence can be louder than words. Kale inclined his head slightly. Exactly. The galaxy is full of voices, many loud and commanding. But impact is measured not by volume, but by results, consistency, and integrity. As the observation deck grew quiet, Kale thought about the future. Humanity's rise was ongoing. They would continue to explore new systems, mediate disputes, and innovate technologies that would shape the galaxy for centuries. Yet the principles that had guided them, patience, integrity, intelligence, and resilience, would remain unchanged. He remembered the young humans he had mentored, now leaders in their own right. They embodied the qualities that had allowed humanity to endure and thrive: courage, creativity, compassion, and determination. Kale knew that the foundation they had built would allow future generations to continue humanity's story, facing challenges with confidence and integrity. Lysera remained by his side, silently observing the stars. She had once thought herself superior, certain of humanity's inferiority. But now, she saw a species that had transformed not through force or arrogance, but through deliberate action, collaboration, and the quiet power of resilience. It was a lesson she could not ignore. Your species has changed the galaxy, she said softly. And perhaps, in ways that we will all benefit from. Kale allowed himself a faint smile. That has always been the goal. To act with purpose, to endure, and to rise not by diminishing others, but by building a foundation that benefits all. The hub below continued its activity, a reminder of the vast network of colonies, trade routes, and alliances that humans had fostered. Ships departed and arrived, carrying not only cargo but hope, knowledge, and collaboration. Humanity's influence had become integral to the functioning of the galaxy, a testament to what a species could achieve when underestimated, patient, and persistent. Kale stepped back from the observation window, reflecting on the decades of effort that had brought humanity to this point. The silent departure of a young emissary 27 years ago had been more than a gesture. It had been a choice to wait, to act wisely, and to grow unnoticed. That choice had allowed humans to rise steadily, proving that true strength often lay in strategy, patience, and moral integrity, rather than immediate confrontation. Lysera finally turned to leave, her expression thoughtful. She no longer carried the arrogance of her youth, but a recognition of the quiet power that humans had cultivated. Kale watched her go, knowing that respect, once earned, would endure longer than any insult ever could. As the hub settled into the calm of the evening, Kale remained on the deck, watching the stars stretch endlessly into the distance. Humanity's journey was far from over, but the foundation was solid. They had endured mockery, overcome doubt, and risen through intelligence, integrity, and resilience. And as long as humans continued to act with purpose and patience, they would continue to shape the galaxy in ways that no arrogance could predict. The stars reflected in Kale's eyes as he thought of the silent victories, the careful planning, and the unwavering dedication that had brought humanity to this point. The galaxy had learned, often reluctantly, that humans could endure, innovate, and thrive. And in that quiet triumph, Kale understood that humanity's story was only just beginning. A story defined not by mockery or doubt, but by courage, vision, and an unshakable commitment to rise above every challenge. He took a deep breath, letting the quiet hum of the hub and the distant starlight fill him with calm assurance. Humans had learned the power of silence, patience, and strategy. And now, their accomplishments spoke for themselves, louder than any words, louder than any arrogance, louder than any doubt. Humanity had arrived, and the galaxy could no longer ignore them.